Developing Countries and the World Trade speech inaugurating the 20th Congress of International Chamber of Commerce, New Delhi, February 8, 1965. The year 1965 falls in the middle of what the United Nations have designated as the development decade. In doing so, the United Nations have recognized the crucial task humanity today has is to help developing countries on the road to progress, to enable them to attain a reasonable standard of living and to banish hunger and disease and illiteracy from the world. Consultations towards this end at the government level have been going on at the UN and its specialized agencies in the World Bank, in the GATT, and in the International Monetary Fund for so much time, but not the least in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which met in Geneva last year. It is in fitness of things that such consultations and exchanges should take place not only between the governments but at all levels, particularly between representatives of industry, trade, banking, and all the people who are engaged in different forms of economic activity. The endeavor which adds to the wealth of the nations. The problems are many and great. Cooperation between the governments and cooperation between the private bodies and agencies have to go hand in hand. I am confident that your deliberations will make this significant contribution to the developing countries and to create a dialogue between the developed countries and developing countries. We in India, as many of you know, have been engaged since our independence in the task of development through successive 5-year plans. 2 such plans have completed, and we are about to enter the final year of our 3rd plan. A period of 15 years is not a long period in the history of a nation, yet we can look back with some kind of satisfaction at what we have achieved in the last decade and a half. Despite the increase in population, we have managed to raise per capita consumption of food grains and cloth. We have made a visible impact on illiteracy and disease. There has been an increase in the per capita consumption of shoes, bicycles, and sugar. These commodities may seem quite elementary to you, but they are still not within the economic reach of large section of people. Agriculture is the main source of livelihood for over 2/3 of our population live in villages. In the first decade of planning, it recorded a rate of growth of nearly 3.5%, which is by no means small, but with the 30% of land still without irrigation, agricultural production in India continues to be dependent on the vagaries of the nature and the monsoon. The first 3 years of the 3rd plan were years relatively low production caused by upsurge in the prices in 1964. Fortunately, the crop prospects now are remarkably good. The prices of food grains and other agricultural products have begun to come down. The shortages we experienced last year have been reduced, and crucial importance of agriculture has been realized by most people concerned. In the fourth plan, a concentrated effort will be made to sustain a high degree of growth in agriculture. Agricultural progress, vital as it is, cannot by itself solve the problem. The cultivated agricultural land comes from less than 1 acre per head of population. Only industry can relieve the pressure on land and thus make a real improvement in the standard of living of people. Indeed, even agricultural development depends to a great extent on the supply of fertilizers and insecticides, steel and cement, which are again products of industry. There is no getting away from the fact that the industrial base has got to be widened in India. The production of engineering and chemical industries has been increasing in the past few years at the rate of 15 to 20% per annum. Electricity generation has been rising at the rate of about 10% per annum. Our steel production is now in the neighborhood of 6 million tons, and schemes for further expansion are at hand. In such progress, we have achieved so far the help of cooperation of many that we have received from other countries, large and small, from the East and the West, through private agencies and the government channels. All have made a significant contribution. My thanks. But the fact remains that per capita income of an Indian is still less than 1 rupee a day or less than $6 a month. If I have talked so far of Indian problems and of Indian experience, it is because I know them best, and also because I feel that the basic problems which we have to face, which we are facing, are common to all developing countries, whether they are in Asia, Africa, or Latin America. Basically, the greatest shortage in all developing countries is that of capital. While in the countries, we must do everything possible to encourage the formation of domestic capital, it is quite clear that their own efforts will not suffice to achieve a tolerable rate of progress. In these circumstances, the inflow from communities with high level of voluntary savings can make a tremendous difference to their rate of economic growth. It may well fill the huge gap between requirements and availability to which your president, Mr. Steele, has referred. The difficulties and impediments which stand in way need to be analyzed objectively and dispassionately by a body like the ICC. There are many purely psychological factors on both sides. Investors are apt to feel that there are too many risks in investing in developing countries, On the other hand, in developing countries, partly for historical reasons, there are apprehensions that the influx of private foreign capital may lead to an indirect form of foreign influence. To what extent these doubts on either side are real and to what extent they are imaginary? How can they be allayed? These are the practical issues which should squarely be faced. In doing so, there should be a genuine attempt to appreciate and understand the difficulties both on both sides. Developing countries cannot expect the private capital will come on their terms less favorable than are available elsewhere. Equally, investors must realize that the policies which developing countries are having, uh, which they are pursuing, are born out of hard realities of their own conditions. If they appear to tax industry heavily, it is because they have to provide so many services and utilities to sustain them. And because profits in sheltered markets where scarcity rather than competition is the rule tend to be high. If this Congress, with its constructive approach, comes forward with recommendations which take into account the reality of the situation, I have no doubt that a good deal of progress can be achieved in promoting liberal attitudes on both sides. Another major shortage which hampers development is that of foreign exchange. This shortage is reflected in our efforts to curtail domestic consumption in a country where the standards of consumption are already very low, so as to make more products available for exports. But there are other factors too. All too often, when developing countries are in a position to increase their exports to the markets of industrialized nations, they come up against the barriers of formidable nature. This is indeed a sad phenomena in a world in which there is a growing recognition of the fact that greater and freer trade leads to a greater prosperity for everyone. Most countries in Europe today have, through a customs union or a free trade agreement, abolished trade barriers between themselves. Yet the same countries seem to turn protectionist when it comes to admitting imports from developing countries. Far from receiving preferential treatment which would help provide resources for development, they often come up with restrictions of a discriminatory nature. Although these impediments formally emanate from the government concerned, the actual pressure behind this is that of industrialists and businessmen. It seems to me, therefore, that ICC, which has always stood for freer trade, can use fully these purposes and ways and means whereby developing countries can have a better access to the markets of industrialized nations. Technology is yet another field in which greater cooperation between nations will accelerate the pace of the development in many parts of the globe. Despite the very valuable services provided by the ICC, there still remains a great need for cooperation at the operational level between enterprises and industrial units so that know-how can be transmitted directly from the user to the user. How cooperation in these matters can be further strengthened will, I trust, be engaging your attention in your deliberations here.